The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hi, this is Ken Gidge, and this is Gidge World. We haven't done many Gidge Worlds over the last year, but I think we're going to be doing a little bit more. Why? Because there are a lot of people, interesting people, who live differently, live in different worlds, do different things, and they're really interesting. So if we can find the most interesting people, we'll bring them on. I live here in Nashua. You know who I am, Ken Gidge. I am also your state representative. I was born here in Nashua. My mother was born here in Nashua. My father was born here in Nashua. My wife was born here in Nashua. And I want to introduce you to another member of my family, my son, Sky. You were born here in Nashua.
I was, Dad.
You certainly were.
And what were the first words I heard?
Yeah. Go ahead, tell them.
I don't know, something about Kingsley Street. I want a comedian.
That's the absolute truth. I held you up.
Yeah.
And the window, the shade was open, and I pointed you towards Kingsley Street, and I said, Kingsley Street, Kingsley. And the doctor said, what are you doing? I said, I want a comedian.
Wow.
Now, did I get one?
I don't think so.
No? I think I did. All right. Tell people where you went to school here in the city of Nashville. Let's get a little, I know all about you, and that's probably a problem. So let's think there are people out there who know nothing about you.
I went to Sunset Heights, then Elm Street Junior High, then Nashua High North, and finally the University of New Hampshire, where I majored in journalism.
And from there you went?
I went to intern at a newspaper.
Which one?
Brockton Enterprise, south of Boston, Brockton. The internship was informative. 2008, the newspaper industry wasn't doing so well. So it was pretty clear the internship wasn't going to turn into a job for me. So I moved to Boston to chase my dreams of being a writer. Turns out being a writer isn't so easy. So I worked in terrible, terrible office jobs for about 2 years, moving papers. I worked in the basement of a mental hospital.
And you had a lot of information about people with...
Well, I had to file files, and I listened to tons and tons of BBC history documentaries, and I decided that that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
What, move files around?
Yeah, move files around.
Okay.
So on the weekend, I was teaching English, if you remember, to a friend of a friend, a Chinese girl and her mother, and they seemed like nice people. And
that was way up on Beacon Street, I believe.
Yeah, around there in Boston.
Yeah.
And I decided I enjoy this more than I enjoy working in an office. Why don't I try teaching English somewhere else?
And from there?
I posted a resume online, Dave's ESL Cafe, or eslcafe.com. I got some responses, did some research, and chose a school. And 6 months later, I was teaching in China.
You were teaching in China.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your first time in China, you were in northern China.
Yeah, in a city called Shenyang.
Okay, because you were in 3 places, I'd like everybody to know how different they were. You were in northern China, and you were considered like a rock star?
No, well, like an exotic animal, I guess. Not really a rock star, just people like, they don't see many foreigners. So, and I mean, the second place I lived was even worse, but the first place in Shenyang, north of North Korea, it was very strange to be so special because China is very still monocultural. 94% is Han Chinese. They don't really see minorities like we see in America. So people would stare at me, yeah.
Northern China.
Yeah, north of North Korea, in the subarctic. So quite cold in the winter.
Yeah, so you
less snow than here, though, actually.
Well, I think we're getting more snow this year than Alaska. Okay, so then you came home for a couple of weeks and you headed back to China.
I came home for a month and I decided I'd like to work for an American boss. And I moved to a city that wasn't quite so developed and is like one of the top 10 polluted cities in the world, near
Polluted city.
Yeah, near these coal factories.
Yeah.
And I worked for 6 months there teaching English. Absolute terrible experience.
Why?
I thought I would improve my Chinese because I need to speak it, but I was so special that people wouldn't treat me like a normal person.
Again.
Yeah, I mean, in Shenyang, there was enough foreigners and enough people knew foreigners that you could kind of get by. But in the second city I lived in, Jining in Shandong, people would be driving their car, and then they'd stop the car, get out, take a picture of me, and drive away.
You didn't tell me about that.
I guess it was a drive-by shooting.
Yeah. You mean on?
Yeah, they would
They would stop the car
it.
and take a picture
They'd
of
stop
you?
the car, take a picture of me, maybe shout hello. And I had been in China, so I know that them screaming hello is just getting me to look at them. My roommate, who had been in China a few months, thought they were trying to have a conversation with him. So he'd start trying to talk to them. They don't know anything else. And then the people just drive away. And the pollution was so bad, like the bus drivers would be like, I can't see because of the fog. And it wasn't fog, it was pollution. You couldn't see the car in front of, like, maybe 20 feet in front of us. It was, I don't know. Terrible.
Now you came home again, and you got another job. And where are you now?
I got a job in Shenzhen. It's north of Hong Kong. It's one of the first areas to open up economically. The city's about 30 years old. It's in the top 3 Chinese cities. It's a business-oriented city, manufacturing on the outskirts. Like iPhones. A lot of iPhones are made near there.
And the city you live in, how large?
I think 7 million people, maybe.
Does it seem like you're in a city of 7 million people?
Yeah. But I mean, what they consider a city is pretty big. They have a lot of land, and then I wouldn't really consider that part of the city if the metro doesn't reach there. But yeah, I mean, it's a big city.
Modern. I take it 30 years old. It's pretty modern.
Yeah, the stuff they have is modern. The buildings they have are modern. A lot of the buildings they have are modern. They have a nice subway designed by Germans, I think.
Oh, really? Is
I
it
think
run
so.
by or built
No.
by?
It's run by the local government, but I don't think that that's Chinese engineering.
No, that's right. Germans, in fact, I think they were talking about that in Boston. Some of the engines that broke in some of the cars in Boston.
Yeah,
are
the
made from
German engines broke.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they must be as old as the T.
Probably.
100 years.
Probably.
Wonder if the warranty's still good.
So that was now. That's still you're there and you're still teaching.
Yep, still teaching.
Now you had a couple experiences at a school that they didn't treat you too well.
Oh, that's par for the course in China, almost.
What do you mean?
Respect for employees and employee rights are not very developed there.
How not developed?
Not paying you, for instance. A company might do that to its employees. Paying you 10 days late might do that. Deducting large amounts from your paycheck with no explanation might do that. And a lot of Chinese workers won't ask why because they're afraid to lose their job. Actually, the first time that I worked in China, the first city, before I even received my first paycheck, the foreigners that I worked for a school and they had all these branches around the city. And they would send us out to each branch to teach like one class a week at each branch. And we actually had a strike because they deducted, I didn't get paid, but everybody else I was becoming friends with, they deducted 200 RMB, so maybe just like $30 from the paychecks for no reason. They said because they were changing the tax scheme, and all the foreigners showed up in front of the building, and we were just 9 a.m., showed up peacefully. We're just like, we would like to be paid our full wages. Some of the Chinese people swore at us in like Chinese words. I couldn't understand it. They used pretty bad words for foreigners, like how dare we cause trouble. Then they brought us into the big conference room, and we sat there for about half an hour, and then the big boss man came in with envelopes filled with whatever money he owed each people, and they knew the exact number that they owed each person.
Yeah.
And they gave them out, and then we left, and that was my introduction to workers' rights in China.
And so, so if you were Chinese living in there, you wouldn't complain.
Well, I can give you a perfect example because they did the same thing to the Chinese employees, only worse, that they didn't pay them for a while. Some talked about not going to work, but they just kept working. And I'm not sure that they ever got paid their full wages.
So that's from Chinese to Chinese companies.
Yeah, Chinese company treating the Chinese. Chinese people, their goal, the ones that live in China, are to work for a foreign company because they treat their employees so much better.
Really?
Yeah, they treat their employees so much better. They have employee protection, just basic respect for somebody. Overtime. A lot of Chinese don't get paid overtime. That they're expected to work overtime, but they don't get paid for it. I've heard about a bit of culture shock for Chinese people when they're asked to stop working at 5 p.m. They don't understand why their boss would ask them to stop working at 5 p.m.
Do they think they're getting fired or something? Or?
They just think it's interesting that they'd be asked to go home. But it's a lot of efficiency is tied into that. A Chinese employee who works at a Chinese company, they are notoriously inefficient.
Give me an example.
Something that would, like preparing a document, okay? Maybe an office worker in America would spend 1 hour on this document. A Chinese worker who knows that they're probably not going to get a full paycheck at the end of the month, their boss is rude to them, they'll spend 6 hours on it. And they're both equally capable people, but I've worked in offices with Chinese and foreigners, and the level of productivity is very different. But then Chinese that work at foreign-owned companies that have that kind of company culture of productivity
Yes.
and treating them well,
Yes.
they tend to perform really well. I mean, they do well.
So is this, it's interesting that what you're saying is that the Chinese businesses treat the Chinese poorly. Everyone wants to work for an American company because they're
foreign
companies. And why? What, you say it's just a culture? That's just, why?
I think it has a lot to do with short-term thinking, and you know that they suffered from famines. I think the last famine was 1958, and they had the Cultural Revolution, which didn't end until 1976. And the generation now that runs the businesses was raised by a generation that had to think about benefits today, having food to eat tonight, just immediate short-term gains. So if a boss can not pay all his employees a few hundred RMB and keep that RMB for himself, he might just do that. And he doesn't see anything wrong. It's necessary to protect his family. In his mind, even though it might not actually be that way, and that's an explanation. I mean, I have no scientific evidence that this is true, but that's an explanation that I've heard again and again. It's just the mindset hasn't adjusted to modern business practices.
Well, it's like, I guess what you're saying is like the Great Depression, when
I have no idea.
a lot of people, lost everything, had nothing. Some people were honestly out on the streets. More people sleeping. So they got, then when they got jobs, they really worked hard and turn off the lights.
The Great Leap Forward, to compare it to the Great Depression, I'm sure the Great Depression, some people died from malnutrition, but the largest estimation I've heard for people, Chinese that died, is 80 million.
What?
Up to 80 million. Up to 80 million. That's the highest
During the famine?
Yeah, that's what I've read.
80 million?
That's the highest estimation. Some people say 40, some people say even 10. Yeah. It's difficult because obviously they didn't want to put this on record. Yeah.
No, they wouldn't. Is the Chinese like that? They don't want to, they want to write their own history, if you know what I mean?
Like anybody wants to write their own history, but yeah. Have you ever heard of the concept of face?
No.
It's your outward appearance, and the Chinese put a lot of value on face.
Really?
Yeah. So if they can make the history look good, it's almost as important as the actual content of the history. No matter your opinion about Mao Zedong, he is on almost every piece of Chinese currency. And he's even acknowledged by the Chinese Communist Party as being 80% good, 20% bad. Acknowledged by them. So you'd think that they would have 5,000 years of history. They could choose somebody else to put on some of the money.
Yeah.
But he's on every single one. And that's just a way to make him look good, give him so much respect, even if many Chinese don't feel like he deserves to be celebrated that much.
Now, we hear that China is communist, but you tell us about the party and the people. How do you get into the party?
They select the best of the best from the schools. I mean, I used to have lunch. The first city I lived in, I'd have lunch every Saturday with a teacher I worked with. And one day she's like, "Oh, I'm a member of the Chinese Communist Party." And I was like, "Really?" Nothing seemed particularly special about her. She just did very well in school, got approached to join, decided to join, and it benefits you because you have connections, get better jobs, you meet people who can help you out in some way.
So it's so the rest of the Chinese are not in the Communist Party. So basically, it's the Communist Party that runs the country, but there's such a disconnect between the government and the people?
No. I wouldn't put it like that. I'd say that they understand pretty well what's going on. I'm not sure a disconnect. They don't have, I mean, I told you that I was teaching at the same school and eating lunch with a woman who was a member of the Communist
Yes.
Party. It's not some kind of crazy disconnect like you're imagining, I don't think. They are more entitled. They do get away with more. There's actually a separate justice system for party members.
You're kidding me.
No, seriously. And for officials that disgrace the party or do something very wrong, they have like torture centers.
What?
Well, they're
Torture centers?
where they take people and torture them, yeah.
Oh, please. They have torture centers for people who are elected officials who do bad?
Yeah.
And how do they torture them? Do you have any idea?
You can find information about it online. It's not much information
don't wanna
gets out
talk
about
about
that, but I've read a few articles about it. But well, keep in mind, everything I say, take with a grain of salt. These are things that I've heard people say, things that I've read online, things that Chinese people have told me. I'm an English teacher. I'm not some kind of researcher or anything like that, so
It sounds like it's a perfect place for a writer. You must have.
Depends what you want to write, yeah. Depends what you want to write.
So you've been in China for, what, going on 4 years?
Yeah, almost 4 years.
You planning on staying forever, or?
I wouldn't say forever. I mean, I'd like to move out of teaching. But right now I'm doing quite well with my students. Within the next year,
You founded your own school.
I have private students, and I'm doing okay financially.
So you're your own boss.
Yeah, I'm my own boss.
And you were working for somebody. You talked about the money, but tell us about that person you worked with who had a larger school, I take it, a lot of advertising, and how he treated the kids, no books.
Okay, under the full assumption that because you can't see YouTube in China, under the full assumption that this gentleman who I worked for won't see this, I'll tell you everything. Okay, so basically he had a lot of money that we're pretty sure came from his wife's family. This training center I worked at, he did not care about the students. He did not care about how many students were coming to the training center. He just hired some teachers, gave us rooms, and then put together an advertising team of about 6 people to get students to come. The students come. We have no organization. He wouldn't hire a principal or a qualified leader for the teachers. Basically, it went as well as you can imagine it went. We did our best. We didn't appreciate it when we were insulted for our teaching quality. We didn't appreciate it when we asked for things such as books and markers, and this gentleman who had a lot of money wouldn't provide them. But he would hire an extra assistant for himself, and he wouldn't come to the office most days of the week. To be honest, it may have been a money laundering scheme.
Oh, I didn't think about that. That does happen over there?
It happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. But I mean, I can't imagine why he would be running a place like that so poorly. I mean, unless his ineptitude is beyond what I've ever seen, which could be the case. But
You talked about money laundering. Is there a lot of corruption over there?
is there a lot of corruption? Of course. They acknowledge it.
Give us an example.
They're arresting people, and I wish I could have done a little bit more research. I could give you the names, but this is in the news. They're arresting people. They arrested the head of the security. He was a member of the 9-person team that was running the country for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
They executed some of the people that were closely associated with him for corruption, and also the guy was probably involved in murder and stuff. There's corruption, but it's very ingrained in the system. And a lot...
That's like the top 9 coming down...
There's corruption. There's corruption.
All the way down to where you are? How? Do you see it every day?
Me, personally, my personal experience with corruption is almost zero. I am a foreigner. They don't want to deal with me. I mean, I know of people who work at schools that made a deal with the police or paid some money to somebody to make a problem go away. But the Chinese view of it isn't really that it's corruption. It's just they have a connection, they can help a friend.
For money.
For money.
So that, well, I suppose a great deal of what we go through here in this country is almost the same thing, but this sounds like it's more rampant.
I wouldn't say it's the same thing at all. I'd say that it's a very different system and very different idea of right and wrong.
I just can't understand. What you're saying is that it's passed down. It's like a gene that's in people that...
No, I wouldn't say it's a gene that's making people unethical. I would say that they've been raised with this sort of culture for immediate gain. Financial gain is right. Lying is not wrong. So if you lie to make more money, that's fine.
And that's accepted.
If you sat somebody down and asked them, is it right to lie to make more money? They might say no. But that same person would go to work the next day and do that. If you go online to find advice about running a business in China, they say, be prepared for your Chinese partners to steal from you, because they always will.
That's online?
Yeah, that's online. That's part advice, yeah.
Expect your Chinese partners to steal from you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, an American company goes over there?
Well, okay, we're talking about a small business. If you're talking about a multinational, like Foxconn, for example,
yes,
which is run by Taiwan, who have a better handle on Chinese culture,
yes,
for obvious reasons, they would be able to manage the system a lot better than a foreigner like me trying to start a pizza chain.
Oh no, I understand.
But I mean, these stories are over the place. Like, just pizza chain in Beijing gets up to six stores or whatever. Okay, the Chinese partner who has his name registered, because it's easier to register with a Chinese name than a foreign name. So they use that. The guy decides he's happy with the income coming in from the 6 stores. The next day, he changes the locks and tells the foreign people to go away. Now, what are the foreign people supposed to do? They can bring it to court, and the Chinese courts will almost side with the Chinese. And if they do that, it'll be years as it goes through the legal system. So the people lose 2 years. They lose all that income. It's just worth it more for them to move on. And that's a real risk of doing business in China, from what I've heard.
People like Apple, you did say that Apple...
They contract Foxconn.
Okay.
Foxconn, you know, the huge company, had a rash of suicides a few years ago.
Tell me.
The Apple factories?
Yes.
The employees discovered that if they killed themselves, their family would get quite a bit of money.
What?
You haven't heard this?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
They're working for Apple.
they're working for Apple. They're working in dormitories, and I've had friends who worked in those conditions. Not too happy. And in China, they care about the family, taking care of the parents. They're not happy with how their life is going. They're working 12 hours a day. Somebody jumps off a building. Their family gets a huge sum of money. To them, a huge sum of money. And then for a few weeks or a few months, there's people jumping off the buildings. And then they put up nets. I don't know if they're still up, but they put wood. They built wood out of the side of the buildings and put nets so that people couldn't jump.
You're kidding me.
No.
I've never heard of that.
I think it's pretty, I think it was in the news.
So in other words, someone jumps, they know they're making money, so other people decide to follow this.
Well, it was
to give up their life?
To benefit their family.
Okay, so they must really feel like they had got a bad life.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what they were thinking or feeling. They couldn't have been very happy people.
You have an Apple phone on you, I have an Apple phone on me. You're saying Apple does not send Americans over there to run the company. They hire a company from Taiwan. Is this correct?
Apple contracts Foxconn and a few other companies, yeah.
And so...
They send designers over there. They send people to check on quality. They send...
But you said these people live in dorms, not a very good life, so...
The people making the phones, assembling the phones.
Okay, yeah, they're Chinese.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
So they come in from the country, I take it, outside? Or,
yeah, coming from the countryside.
And they live in the dorms?
Mm-hmm. Live with quite a few people in each dorm room. But you got to understand that this is actually probably an improvement over their other life they could have.
Example?
And they could live in the countryside, make almost no money, have no access to health care, have no discernible future. I mean, other than getting old in the countryside, taking care of their family and dying. A lot of people move to the big city to chase their dream. I mean, that's true in America, too. And you start at the bottom, which is usually manufacturing jobs, at least where I live.
No, you said the people who make Apple phones work 12-hour days?
I don't know exactly. And actually, that might not even be true anymore. You can read these reports online.
Okay.
Apple contracts companies, and they find, every now and again, they find a company forcing people to work longer than they're supposed to. I think they had trouble with child labor a few years ago, but now they don't. I think that they've improved the system overall. But all these improvements, which is happening across the board, is actually causing trouble for the Chinese companies because they can't stay profitable.
What?
They can't stay profitable because before the labor was so cheap, the American companies contracted them, so a lot of the factories are moving west. I mean, I personally have a student, his parents, and I also teach his parents English. They have a factory that they had to close down because the costs just got too high. They had to pay the employees too much, and so they have to move the factory to west where
they can get cheaper.
Yeah, cheaper labor.
Wow, I didn't know all of this. I didn't know all of this. So the Chinese are having problems. I mean, what do they pay their employees? Do you have any idea?
It depends where you live. Depends if you live in a city. I know that you're going to want the number in dollars, and I've been there for so long that I just think in their currency now. Okay. An English teacher starting out would probably make about 12,000 RMB starting in a basic city and maybe housing provided. A Chinese secretary who sits at a front desk 9 hours a day and answers phones might make 3,000 RMB.
That's a month.
Yeah, a month. Sorry.
And an RMB is?
RMB, it takes a little bit more than 6 RMB to equal $1.
Okay, 6 RMB for $1. Okay, so, wow, I'm getting to learn. I didn't know all of this. I didn't know that. I'm not saying it's bad. You've been there a while. Have you noticed the country itself growing? The people, are they changing an attitude towards the government? Are they expecting more?
I'd say, based on personal experience, it seems to be closing off a little bit.
What do you mean?
More and more foreign websites are blocked. people who've been there longer than me say that most companies used to offer English services or services in English. Now a lot of them don't. American companies or foreign companies trying to do business in China have to face a lot of government pressure. And like they have to compete with state-owned companies, or they're not even let in at all.
American companies.
Yeah, or they're not let in. Like YouTube isn't allowed in. Facebook, no.
Yeah, and I think Google,
Google voluntarily backed out when they found out that the Chinese government was trying to hack into their email system. So if you in China try to go to Google, they send you to the Hong Kong website, but they block that too. And they make Gmail very slow on purpose, so it looks like Gmail's doing a bad job, so people switch to something
from
China.
Something from China.
Or something more friendly to the Chinese government's.
In other words, they'll give them the information they want.
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Alibaba, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, Jack Ma, all that.
Runs everything, phones, everything.
I know his auction site. I know, I don't know how to say it in English.
He's the largest company in the world.
There's
I believe.
It's internet banking. It's a new internet banking thing he's doing. It's pretty successful.
Really?
Yeah. Alipay. It's called Alipay in English. I don't know. He seems like an enterprising guy. You weren't a big fan of him because...
Well, I saw him on Charlie Rose, and he was interviewed. And and of course, it's interesting that we're talking about Alibaba, because Charlie Rose asked him, he says, well, you know, you got a big company and you're coming here, but the government stopped other companies from doing what you were doing, so you had, you know, quite a long time with no competition. Does that sound like?
Well, that's the truth. China signed on with the World Trade Organization, and they do have a lot of policies that are protectionist, but they are growing their domestic market and abilities. They want to have Chinese brands that can compete on a global scale, or at least that's the official line. And if they let, for instance, foreign banks come in and do business in China, I'm guessing that almost every Chinese person would put their money in with a foreign bank.
All right, you told me about going in and opening a...
Oh, the Chinese banking system is...
Tell the...
How long do you think it takes to open a bank account here? You have proper identification, everything ready, you just want to open a bank account at the bank down the street.
Maybe 20 minutes.
Okay, 20 minutes. Process in China, even for a Chinese person, maybe 2 or 3 hours.
Why?
Lines? I have no idea why they make it take so long. I've heard that the banking system was designed for people whose job was just to stand in line for big companies. It was never designed to be a retail banking system, and they haven't caught up yet. I mean, there's a few banks that are getting better, but the difference between Hong Kong banking and going to a bank in mainland China is just a world of difference. You go to a bank in mainland China, and you will be standing or sitting there for 45 minutes before somebody talks to you to tell you that you're in the wrong place.
So you got to go someplace to get on another line?
You got to go someplace, get in another line. Their hospitals are set up like that too.
Explain.
You have to stand in a line to find out where you should go, then you stand in a line somewhere else. Then a lot of times you'll be told that you're in the wrong line or that's not the right department. I graphed it out a long time ago when I first got medical treatment in China. So it was, you go to the front desk and they send you to another desk, and then that desk tells you you should go to what floor. Then the doctor there told me I was on the wrong floor, so we had to go back to the front desk to go to a different floor. At the different floor, they sent us to see a doctor where we stood in line. The doctor prescribed medicine for me, which we had to go downstairs to buy and bring the medicine back up to the doctor so the doctor could explain the medicine to me. And that's just, that was when I had a bad case of conjunctivitis.
Okay. Now, you did say, so these are, get back to the banking. The banking system basically is, I take it the hospitals also are Chinese and run by Chinese, and that's the way they do it.
Well, there's a few hospitals designed for Westerners, run by Westerners, but they're too expensive.
For the Chinese.
Too expensive for most Chinese, and probably too expensive for me too.
Really?
I mean, I could shell out the money if I wanted to, but it'd be a huge amount in comparison to my income. They're more designed for businessmen over there.
So, what do they fear if Hong Kong banks come in and treat people better, and you can get through everything in a short period of time?
From what Well, from what I understand is they don't want foreign banks because the foreign banks will outperform the Chinese banks. The Chinese government also controls the interest rate that a Chinese person can earn on their bank account, which is sometimes below inflation, which obviously isn't a very smart investment for them. This is just stuff that I've read. If a foreign bank came in, they're afraid of capital flight, money going out of the country, stuff like that. Recently, they said that they were going to open a part of the city I live in and let Hong Kong banks set up there.
Yeah.
And that's meant to put pressure on the Chinese banking system so it will improve and have some competition from a more advanced retail form of banking.
In other words, you can't get somebody, a Chinese person probably working in the U.S. banking, come over there and straighten the banking system out. You need to have a bank come over to show them basically how to run it?
I think the idea, the government's idea, is that it's going to provide competition and force the state-owned banks to improve. A Chinese person going there to fix it, I think that these are huge institutions that can't be changed that easily.
Okay, healthcare.
Yeah.
Tell me about healthcare. I think last time you were here once before, and you told me, I think, was it the first day you were there, you saw somebody laying on the ground in front of the hospital?
Oh, second day in China, I saw somebody dying in front of the hospital, which opened my eyes to what, it's 2011 maybe, or maybe late 2010. I guess I'll describe it for you. In China, or in many places, if you don't have enough money to pay for whatever medical service you need ahead of time, they won't treat you.
They won't. Dying outside doesn't make any difference to them?
No. They have no legal obligation to treat you, and in fact, in some hospitals, the people that treat you, if it comes out that the patient can't pay, their wages are docked for providing service to a patient who couldn't pay. And
you mean if a doctor...
if a doctor helps somebody, uses the hospital's resources, and it turns out that this is a farmer who makes not enough money to pay for the medical treatment he received, they might take the wages away from the doctor.
Take the money away from the doctor,
yeah. So one of my first days in China, I saw a man, shiny, nice hospital, right? Beautiful, like something you would see in America, or like maybe a Boston hospital, amazing. And they had this big glass window and like emergency room in Chinese and English also, I think. And there's this man laying out front with like kind of a straw hat, and he looked kind of dirty. He was a migrant worker. It's very easy to spot them. They travel the city to sweep the street. This migrant worker had his legs basically busted open. I could see the bone coming out of his legs and the skin turning green. And there was a small crowd staring at him and some security guards staring at him. And he was in full view of whoever was in the hospital. Somebody must have dropped him off there hoping that somebody would help him. But when I saw him, he was just laying there. And if he wasn't dead yet, he was going to die. I mean, he had gangrene.
That doesn't make that. Am I wrong to say that life has less meaning there in China than it does here?
I've heard that a lot, and they say life is cheap in China. Yeah. You want to hear some real horror stories?
Sure.
This happens sometimes. People get hit by a car, and it is cheaper to kill a person and pay off the family than to hit a person and pay for their medical bills for the rest of their life. So cars will go back and kill the person.
What? They'll back up over them
Yeah.
to make sure that they're dead?
Yes, yeah.
Is that...
Okay, it sounds terrible and unethical, and it is. But you need to think of it in terms, if you don't have money, you don't get medical treatment. Families are very close together. If you don't have money, somebody in your family gets cancer, you can't pay for it, they die. So in the person who hit the other person's mind, if he's saving his family some money, he could be saving his own mother.
So by killing the person, it's...
Yeah, and this is because they don't have a social safety net, which they're building, which hasn't come to fruition yet, but that's the problem.
Now, you did mention earlier that are they trying to run the U.S. out? Are they treating Americans?
I haven't received any open hostility. They obviously favor Chinese companies. They want to make them stronger.
But American companies going in there, it's harder to get in there.
Yeah, of course.
So they would rather... Do they steal from, like, Apple goes in there and starts making phones? Do they grab the technology?
I have no personal experience with this, but I've read enough news about it, yeah. They are trying to pass a law, or they did pass a law, that any technology worked on inside of China has to be shared with a Chinese company.
You're kidding me.
Now, I don't know if this law went through, but a lot of foreign companies were quite angry about that. It's essentially going to drive the innovators out of China.
I would think that, where would they go?
Where would they go?
Yeah. I mean, is there another country where, that will treat their...
Microsoft just laid off a few thousand people in China and moved their production to Vietnam, I think.
Vietnam?
Yeah, Vietnam.
You've been to Vietnam?
No, I've been to Laos.
Laos,
Yeah.
okay. And you had an opportunity to go to North Korea, and I said, go, and you said, are you crazy?
I don't think I said, are you crazy? I think that was, they had just grabbed some American for something
Oh.
a few years ago.
Yeah, okay.
It didn't seem like the best time for me to go there.
But you did have an opportunity to go.
You can apply, and it's a weird system. There's plenty of videos on YouTube about this.
About?
Going to North Korea.
So if you're an American, don't go?
I have no idea. I mean,
Well, you
are
didn't
they
go.
letting Americans in now? They closed off the Korean marathon because of Ebola risk.
Oh, I see.
But
I see.
I'm not sure. I think that was just they didn't want a bunch of foreigners running around the streets of their country.
You know, you did say that what the Chinese want to do is they want to, instead of making the product and putting people to work, they, for another company, they want that quality to be sold to the world. Is this correct?
I don't totally follow.
Well, I mean, if they could make a phone like Apple, as good as Apple,
Yeah.
they would want to sell that. In other
Of
words,
course, and they're catching up. They're getting better. Their products are getting better.
give me an example. What do you mean?
Xiaomi is a type of phone, cheaper, a lot cheaper than iPhone, popular with Chinese people. Quality's good. I mean, I have maybe 3 friends, foreign friends in China that decided to buy one of the Chinese brand phones because bigger screen, a lot cheaper than an Apple, quality is decent. It's a Chinese brand. But on their keynote speeches, they constantly compare themselves to Apple, which doesn't look so good. They're not quite innovating yet. They're kind of just chasing Apple and Samsung and providing a cheaper and comparable alternative.
Okay, you've lived there for 4 years. Hop another 4 years. How do you think China will be?
How do I think it will be? This really depends on the president, Xi Jinping. It depends on what policies he pursues. Depends on whether they actually open the economy more or close it off more. And I mean, even the most educated China watchers probably won't be able to give you a great answer about that. I hope they open up more. I hope they become more accepting of Western competition. I hope they allow freer media.
No freedom
What do you mean, no freedom?
in media.
Yeah, a lot of self-censorship. Self-censorship.
Well, we had talked about this before. When you first went to China, you had on your, your computer screen, the gentleman who, during the Tiananmen Square, massacre, he stood in front of a tank, and the tank would try to go around him, and he'd walk over, and you said that you showed that to Chinese people, and they.
I asked a few people I had that picture on my wall in college. That's such an iconic picture.
Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily, it's about the little guy standing up to a big tank.
Yeah.
It's such an iconic picture. I think everywhere else in the world would know it. But an average Chinese person, either they don't admit to knowing it or they've never seen it before. Yeah. So it's kind of been erased.
Socially, how's China, or do you go across the border?
What do you mean, into Hong Kong?
Yes.
And what do you mean by socially?
Well, I mean, meeting ladies, going out to, is there a sport that takes place? I'm trying to say, okay, here's the U.S. What do you do over there in the evenings?
I work, or I play pool, or I study Chinese.
And you mentioned there's a lot of drinking over there.
Yeah, they have a big drinking culture. Businessmen get together and drink. It's the thing they do. It's a little bit strange. Like, if somebody here drinks like 7 beers a night or whatever, you'd be like, that guy has a problem. In China, they'd be like, that guy's so cool. He's so strong. He can drink so much.
That's the philosophy.
Not with everybody, but yeah, there's quite a bit of that.
Smoking?
Oh, every guy smokes, but if a woman smokes, it's not a good sign.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Let's just say a good girl wouldn't smoke. A proper Chinese woman would not smoke.
Okay, let's get into something a little bit more personal. Do the Chinese girls find you more interesting than a Chinese man?
I'd say yes, but it can be on a bit of a superficial level. I know a lot of people might have an idea of going to China and dating people, but the cultural differences between relationships is really difficult.
Example?
I'd say that I've had 2 serious relationships with Chinese girls, and maybe all women, but one moment they're suddenly angry and you don't know why, and very angry, and you don't understand what you said wrong, what you did wrong. Maybe something about money. Maybe she expected you to go with her to some event and you didn't understand the hint that she wanted you to go. And these are things that you pick up very easily in somebody whose native language is English and you share a native language.
All right, language. You do. I know you've been home and you have your headphones on and you got the Chinese books open and you're looking at the screen. You want to learn more about the language? Explain.
Yeah, I study Chinese on the official government test. I'm a level 4 out of 6.
So what does that mean?
I can have day-to-day conversations, maybe a bit above that, understand emails, type it, definitely text messages, stuff like that, talk to friends in Chinese.
How do you text in Chinese?
You type the sounds.
Give me an example.
Okay, so the Chinese characters are not phonetic, right?
Okay, right.
They're symbols to represent ideas.
Okay.
So in the 1950s, I think, they invented the pinyin system, which is using Roman characters to represent Chinese sounds. You type these Roman characters, like A, B, C, D,
Yeah.
into your phone to represent the Chinese sound, and the phone lets you choose between 5 characters that it could be, and that's how you form sentences with characters.
Now, do you want to you want to read Chinese? Is this correct?
Yeah.
Literature, just to get along over there, or?
I really like reading stories. I like reading stories, so I read some stories in Chinese.
No. Also, talk about writing. When you came home, one of the first things you did mention, and by the way, I'm sure it's like this with every family. You know, your kid goes away, he comes home, you want to know something, you can't get anything out of him, except you wrote for a magazine on food.
Yeah, I wrote a 300-word restaurant review.
Tell our watchers, what was it?
It was a upscale. It's just an upscale seafood place with a wine bar. I wrote a 300-word food review, just freelance, something to do.
Did it go into a magazine or?
Yeah, it'll be in a magazine this month. It's just a simple food review.
So are you trying to? Is that a way to get into magazines or?
I'd be happy to write more articles for them. Have to see if it comes to that. I'll talk to them about it when I go back.
But you're getting more interested in the business aspect.
The business aspect in China?
Yes.
I'd be very happy to pursue any business opportunities.
Okay. Okay, so over here we have baseball, basketball. I mean, do they have games like that?
Badminton.
What?
Badminton is a national sport. Ping pong, obviously.
Yeah.
But the thing that most people don't know is badminton. They are crazy about badminton. Badminton superstars posing like next to milk brands.
You're kidding me.
And cooking oil brands.
I never heard that.
And it's like a guy holding a badminton racket, and you think, like, what an uninteresting sport. but no, they're like superstars there. I mean, we have American football, so they look at that and they're like, what is this?
Yeah, it looks
like a giant guys smashing into each other.
They look dangerous.
Yeah, they look dangerous.
We're not fooling around with those Americans over there. They put the helmets on and they try to kill each other.
Basically, yeah. But I mean, they tried to start some American football leagues there. I don't think they took off very well.
Baseball is...
I've never seen Chinese people playing baseball.
Really?
I've never seen kids in a park playing baseball. Plenty of soccer.
Soccer must be the...
It's strange because I spend so much time with people from other parts of the world. Now I would call soccer football. French fries, chips.
Oh, really?
Yeah. These are trousers, by the way.
So, okay. Besides meeting, you obviously have met a lot of Chinese people. Do they possess a religion? Do they have a philosophy?
When I was in Western China, I saw a lot more signs of religion, a lot more prayer beads, stuff like that. In Eastern China, they had the religion pretty much taken away from them, and a lot of them haven't gotten it back. But there are state-sponsored churches and some underground churches. The interesting thing about the state-sponsored churches is they can't preach about the end of days. They can't preach about the second... on paper, they're not supposed to preach about the second coming of Christ and Judgment Day, because it suggests a time when the Communist Party won't be in power.
And the Dalai Lama?
They're not a fan of the Dalai Lama. Some of the more hilarious insults that I've heard is he is as bad as the Dalai Lama.
Really?
Yeah, the state media can be pretty tone deaf as far as what public opinion outside of China is.
We don't see it, and there's probably reasons for it. Are there any demonstrations?
Anti-Japanese demonstrations.
Anti-Japanese?
Yeah.
Any because of what took place during the war, obviously. They're
Yeah,
still mad at the Japanese.
World War II, and I mean the way that my Chinese friends explained it is that the government gives people a chance to let off steam towards an enemy. You got to understand that the hatred towards Japan is how the government, it's how it's branded itself since 1990, is Japan is our enemy, Japan did terrible things, Japan never apologized, which actually isn't true. They have apologized. Maybe not as sincerely as the Germans did, but Japan has officially apologized on many occasions. The city I was living in 2 years ago, they had anti-Japanese riots on the street. They smashed the sushi shops and flipped over the Japanese cars. Sushi shops which were owned by Chinese people, where Chinese people worked. Cars which were manufactured in China by Chinese people, just had a Japanese brand and Japanese supervisors at the plant.
Wow, that's certainly interesting.
Every night you can turn on the TV and see anti-Japanese soap operas.
How about American?
Anti-American? There's some anti-American diatribes in the press, but I've never seen an anti-American TV show specifically.
We got less than 40 seconds. How can people get in touch with you? Email address? You're on Facebook?
Yeah, they can search for me on Facebook. My name is right here.
Yeah, Sky Gidge, who is
Right here?
who is my son, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Parents don't tell their children that they love them enough. And probably I tell you maybe too much, but I really love you, kid. And
I love you too, Dad.
Your mom, your mom and I are proud of you. And by the way, this kid does have a sense of humor. Okay, thank you very much. This has been Gidge World.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.